So Prime Minister Mark Carney, that's going to take a little getting used to. Well, hopefully not for that long if we do have an election. But Prime Minister Mark Carney is making his rounds and he's going to meet the closeted Liberal Doug Ford. You also have a huge Canadian endorsement for Pierre Poilievre and devastatingly good, devastatingly bad news for the Bank of Canada with its recent rate cut. All of that is going to be jam-packed in this video, so I hope you stick around for the full thing. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. Now that I'm back in Prince George, I'm back to reality. I'm back in the studio. I'm ready. I'm waiting for what's going to happen next with politics. I got my computer ready to go. But specifically, I'm back to real life. I'm no longer on vacation or in vacation mode in my trailer down by the beach on Vancouver Island. So today I had to go into town and renew my Costco membership. And we're having I'm going to get chirped for this no matter how I say it. We're having a big snowfall. And to those that are saying it's not a big snowfall, it's a regular snowfall. We're having a very averagely large Canadian snowfall right now. Lots of snow on the ground. So I go to Costco. First time my boots have touched snow in like 3 months. And I literally, the moment I step out of my truck, I slip and fall and eat shit. And my back is all out of alignment. Like I'm in so much pain. And I just need to know how long I keep my truck running on idle before we have Florida weather here. I'm not saying I want that, but if it happens, at least I won't trip and fall on literal snow and ice the way I did today. It was embarrassing. I hope nobody saw that, but without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting with a massive endorsement for Pierre Poilievre. Canadian Prepper has 1.3 million subscribers, millions of subscribers on YouTube, and he had this to say. His video on YouTube got maybe 200,000 views or more. Pretty massive. He had this to say about endorsing Pierre Poilievre.
Today is the day where I, for the first time ever in this channel's history, openly endorse a political candidate. Something I've refrained from doing for 10 long years. I've now been reduced to being a single issue voter here in Canada. And that's because of this issue right here. I've never officially and resolutely supported anyone, and that is what I'm doing today in my endorsement for Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader in Canada for the next Prime Minister of this country. I officially and openly endorse Pierre Poilievre. When it boils down to it, for me personally, one of the cardinal privileges and rights is your ability to defend yourself. Once they can take that away, they can basically take anything away. So if you're on the left and you watch this channel and you've always supported my political agnosticism, I don't want you to think that anything is going to change above and beyond my supporting Pierre Poilievre, for that simple reason that he has agreed to repeal all of these inefficacious laws.
I mean, that's pretty huge, right? Endorsing a political candidate based off a single issue voter, I think is what he said, or maybe I'm sabotaging that. That's pretty massive endorsement. He has a huge following and probably one of the biggest gun advocates, obviously the biggest prepping channel on the platform of YouTube, if not just in Canada. Like huge. And I want to pass the question off to you. Like, in terms of your support, I know that the most majority. Why am I stumbling on easy words today? It's probably because I freaking fell out of my truck. The majority of the viewers of this channel, reoccurring new viewers, are more conservative leaning to the right. And so I'm just going to ask a softball question here. Who do you want to vote for? What party? Are you a single issue voter? Is Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative, checking more boxes? Or maybe even you're a liberal, or God forbid you're an NDP and you watch these videos. If that's the case, bless your heart, as they say down in the South. But nonetheless, who are you voting for? And are you a single or multiple issue voter? Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. In terms of Pierre Poilievre and it feels like recently he's been fumbling just a little bit. Like, I like the guy. I like his messaging. But it's similar. It's almost identical with the tariffs and the response to America. And it seems like he's trying to poach a lot of liberal supporters and liberal voters, which that's the game of politics. But again, I think we're all just getting a little bit of cabin fever here with the prorogation of government. And literally the hottest topic in the world right now, it's not a boy band. It's not a rock star. It's not, a movie or a celebrity. It's not going to space. It's just politics. It's not even sports. It's literally just politics. It's crazy how much attention is on politics, how divisive it is. You could be saying 99 things right, and then you say one thing that it's like, oh, I don't agree with that. And all of a sudden, poof, there goes like support, right? It's just so touchy, and it's very bizarre. But I want to know what you guys think down below. Now we're getting into Carney, Mr. Carney. So there you go, meeting with the fat pig mentality, Doug Ford with rabies. Can't believe it was on the news for saying that. There you go. They're shaking hands, and Doug Ford did congratulate him on his victory. More on that in a little bit. Before we get into what Doug Ford said, I do want to take a look here at what our biggest LARPer in Canada said, Melanie Joly. I can't even say Trudeau's mistress anymore because nobody cares about Trudeau. He's gone. But here you go.
You've just heard the actions we're taking from my colleague and friend, Dominique Leblanc. Canada is holding strong and will continue to do so together. Well, make no mistake though, this is going to be a day-to-day fight. This is now the second round of unjustified tariffs leveled against Canada and Canadian goods. The excuse for the first round was exaggerated claims about our border. We addressed all the concerns raised by the U.S., and in return, they agreed to temporarily abide by the free trade agreement President Trump signed himself with Canada. The latest excuse is national security, despite the fact that Canadian steel and aluminum add to America's security, not take away from it. All the while, there is a threat to further and broader tariffs on April 2nd still looming. The excuse for those tariffs shifts every day. The only constant in this unjustified and unjustifiable trade war seems to be President Trump's talks of annexing our country through economic coercion. Yesterday, he called our border a fictional line and repeated his disrespectful 51st state rhetoric. Well, Canadians have made it very clear that we will not back down and we will not give in to this coercion.
Okay, there you go. I mean, the 51st state thing, to me now that it's been happening for quite some time, it just feels like trolling. Initially when he said it, it was like, holy crap, can he do that? And now that time has passed, it's like, it logistically just doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't, even with brute force, it just logistically doesn't make any sense. And so we have to come to the conclusion, at least I'm coming to the conclusion, that he's just trolling, just having fun with 51st state stuff. And so the Canadian government has every ability to just, chirp back. Like, why not? This is the world we live in, folks. We live in memes and these little sound bites. And if you're not able to do it, then you're just going to be absolutely obliterated. And that seems to be our Canadian government. I'm not saying turn into some, 22-year-old mentality of calling people fam and stuff like that. But the Canadian government should be able to at least, clap back a little bit, just a little bit. At least I would personally like to see that. But yeah, that's just me. Now let's get into Mr. Rabies, Mr. Ford here, and what he has to say about his message ahead of meeting with U.S. officials.
How the meeting went with Mark Carney.
Yeah, it went very well, actually. He's quite a good gentleman.
Butt kisser.
And we just discussed what we're going to be facing with this USMCA deal. And I always tell everyone, get rid of this carbon tax, which he's agreeing to, which is good. So we won't be paying 20 cents a litre on gas. It's going to give you a little, stimulate the economy and make us more competitive. And just said we got to focus on jobs because the foundation of everything is our economy.
And it sounds like you guys agreed on the retaliation measures.
Yes, we did. So we're going to go down there tomorrow and I want to make sure everyone understands the expectations is to go down there, build that relationship, talk about the USMCA. We aren't walking away with the USMCA, but for years being in business, it's all about building the relationship, understanding what they require, what our needs are, and move forward. And let's get this moving forward as quickly as we can.
It was a whirlwind day yesterday for sure. Hopefully you got a little bit of sleep.
None. 4 hours.
At this point, at the end of the day, you were back on American networks. Mm-hmm. There were some quotes from the inner circle of Trump, more or less declaring this a win yesterday. So what are your thoughts? Is this a win for Trump, or how do you back from that?
If they want to call it a win, whatever. It's they're playing politics. But here and there, what happened yesterday very clearly, Secretary Lutnick called me. I didn't call him. Put an olive branch out, and only a foolish person would decline or hang up on someone and say, I'm not listening. We said, well, that's fine. We need a meeting. We need it right away. He agreed. He said, fly down tonight, fly down tomorrow, the next day. We're bringing Minister LeBlanc with us and the ambassador to have that conversation, to sit down and see what their requirements are, what their needs are. I always say, when you have your largest customer, you listen to your largest customer in business. And we'll sit there and listen and make sure that we bring that information back and sit around the table. It's the federal government that's leading this, not myself. They're going to lead the negotiations. We'll have a very loud voice in that conversation, along with all the other premiers.
So you're managing expectations at this point. At what point do you potentially bring it back to more surcharges and the other tools in your toolbox, as you say?
Well, we're seeing what's going to happen. I know Dominic LeBlanc is out right now talking about the $29-30 billion of retaliatory tariffs. Our message down there tomorrow is let's stop this. It's going to hurt both economies. It's American people that are going to get hurt. Canadians are going to get hurt. Let's sit down and start moving forward on what you want to see in the USMCA and what we want to see in the USMCA.
Does the actions in Ottawa today hamper what you're going into tomorrow?
I don't think so. A little bit of uncertainty. I'd encourage all parties. Let's bring certainty to the table. Let's let the people of Canada decide who they want to lead this country for the next 4 years. And we're going to work with anyone.
His demeanor, his language, the cadence of his speech, like everything has changed. He went from being a complete nut job. Folks, this is the guy that immediately at the sign of any sort of turbulence or adversity, we're going to cut off the power with a smile on my face. Like that's literally the first press conference he had at any sign of tariffs. And now he's just so docile. It's like he's on some horse tranquilizer or something. Yeah, we might have an election and it would be really good for Canadians to decide who's going to lead this country over the next 4 years. And I can't believe that some extremist YouTuber called me a fat pig with rabies, because that's just factually very correct with the mentality. Like, the guy's got no charisma anymore. He's just deflated. I get it. Maybe he had a bad sleep. Maybe he didn't have coffee, but it's just weird. It's just weird to go from such an extreme high to such a pathetic low instantaneously. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and listen to what the liaison between the White House had to say, excuse me, to Doug Ford yesterday when he went from, we're going to cut off their power to, we're going to remove our surcharge of 25%. Like in a matter of minutes, a flip got switched. But I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see how that does play out. Now we're going to get into the Bank of Canada stuff, because this is craziness what's going on. Now, I'm not an economist. I just see what people are saying about this, and they're saying it's bad. It's bad to bring rates down the way they're doing when our cost of living is so high, when our economy is where it's at. So let's get into, in case you haven't seen it, where we're at. The Bank of Canada cuts us by 25 basis points to 2.75% as the country faces a new crisis from tariffs. And I'm just going to put a pin in it before we continue reading this article, because I am under the impression, as a regular person, okay, now, if you're looking to buy a house, hey, look, man, you got more borrowing power. It's down to 2.75%. You go to a bank, usually it's what? Prime plus 1. That would bring you to 3.75%. But no, as my 2-year-old daughter likes to say, that's not actually true. Consumer rates of borrowing power for mortgages, they're not following the Bank of Canada interest rates. I never really looked into this. I didn't really know anything about this until kind of last night. So this is right from TD's website. A 3-year fixed close, 4.79. A 5-year fixed close, and this is a special rates, 4.74. 5-year fixed close, 4.64, and a 5-year variable, which is what most people do, is at 5.14%. So almost 5.2%. But the Bank of Canada interest rates are at 2.75%. Now, maybe there's a reasonable explanation for this. Maybe the banks and lenders are just not really buying into interest rates coming down, and so they don't want to risk the risk versus reward by passing that off to consumers. So to me, with my very limited knowledge of this, says that it feels like we're on the brink of a recession. The fact that the Bank of Canada's rates are coming down, but your ability to get a mortgage and my ability to get a mortgage is still stuck at 5.2%. when it should be under 4%, right? That's a little frightening to me. And so I don't know. I just feel like it's just superficial cuts right now to make it seem attractive to maybe foreign investors to come and, make their dealerships for cars here, the manufacturers, warehouses and stuff like that. But we don't seem to be able to really benefit from these rate cuts. And so that to me is a bad sign. But for those that didn't read this or didn't get clued into the news or maybe just want to recap, let's take a look at what this article and what the actual announcement looked like. The Bank of Canada has cut its overnight lending rate by 25 basis points to 2.75%. It announced on Wednesday as an ongoing trade war with the U.S. begins to strain the Canadian economy. Explaining the decision in his opening remarks, the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem said the economy started the year strong with solid GDP growth and inflation within its 2% target. But tariff uncertainty caused by the on-again, off-again trade war between Canada and the U.S. has weighed on businesses' spending and hiring and shaking consumer confidence, he said. Manufacturing businesses in particular have lowered their sales outlooks. It's against this backdrop that the central bank decided to cut the rate by a quarter point, according to Macklem, though he added that a surge in exports ahead of tariffs might offset the slowdown in growth. While it is still too early to see much impact of new tariffs on the economy activity, our surveys suggest that threats of new tariffs and uncertainty about the Canada-U.S. trade relationships are having a big impact on business and consumer intentions. And I'm going to kind of agree with the fact that we're just not really in a buying time right now. Like, I don't know many people that are just going out and buying new cars, getting themselves into, big mortgages, like, over $500,000 to $1 million mortgages. We're not really, just people are very stingy right now with their finances, to generalize, right? That varies. Some have no options. Some are choosing to be a little bit more conservative. But for the most part, I think people are just so uncertain of where things are heading in the next 6 months to a year, even 2 weeks from now. We don't know what kind of tariffs are going to get put on or removed. It's so speculative and so volatile. But let's take a look now at what this goof has to say.
Today, we lowered our policy interest rate by 25 basis points to 2.75%. The Canadian economy ended 2024 in good shape. Inflation has been close to the 2% target since last summer. Substantial cuts to our policy interest rate through the second half of last year boosted household spending and strengthened economic growth. However, in recent months, the pervasive uncertainty created by continuously changing U.S. tariff threats have shaken business and consumer confidence. This is restraining household spending intentions and businesses' plans to hire and invest. Against this backdrop, and with inflation near the 2% target, the Governing Council decided to reduce the policy rate a further 25 basis points. Looking ahead, the trade conflict with the United States can be expected to weigh on economic activity while also increasing prices and inflation. The Governing Council will proceed carefully with any further changes to our policy rate, given the need to assess both the upward pressure on inflation from higher costs and the downward pressure from weaker demand.
Okay, so there you go, right? It's cutting down on our rates, and so that's got to be good, right? That's got to be good. Well, we're going to take a look at what the mortgage guy in Canada, Ron Butler, has to say in a few moments. We're going to continue reading this article here. It's the 7th consecutive cut the bank has made since it started bringing rates down in June of 2024. They're clearly worried that an economy that was otherwise in pretty good shape and wouldn't have needed a rate cut now needs this one, and perhaps more, given the potential shock from higher tariffs and what that's going to do to the Canadian economy in the near term. We're now facing a new crisis. And it seems like we're always facing a new crisis. Like, we're just not living in normal times. Am I delusional? Am I, high on my own supply by thinking that back in the day, things were a lot calmer politically and economically, right? Like, I didn't pay attention to this 15, 20 years ago, right? I barely paid attention to this 5 years ago. But it just feels like when I was younger, when I was a wee little lad, right? Like in high school or even before high school and stuff like that, that we weren't just facing this crisis, a new threat every single day. Now, it did come in different shapes and forms, but maybe now it's just a news cycle. Maybe it's because we're always glued to like our phones, our TVs, and there's just new information, bam, 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 all the time, multiple times a day. Maybe because we have direct lines of communication with Trump, right? With social media, with our own politicians. Like, it's just always in our face. But I just feel like there's such an overwhelming amount of breaking news and new conflicts, new crisis, even just here in Canada. It's very exhausting. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe you can relate to that, but let me know your guys' thoughts down below, because I'm just so politically and economically exhausted just from consuming it in abundance. So the new crisis. The bank's internal research shows that Canadian businesses intend to raise prices to offset the impact of tariffs. As Macklem noted, less spending by businesses and consumers tends to put downward pressure on inflation, but rising costs could trigger it. We're now facing a new crisis. Depending on the extent and duration of the new U.S. tariffs, the economic impact could be severe. The uncertainty alone is already causing harm, he said on Wednesday. Macklem has warned in the past that the bank cannot shield the Canadian economy from the financial impacts of tariffs, but that is instead use interest rates to manage potential surge in inflation. Okay, let's take a look at what he said here.
In the U.S., Jay Powell has talked about how it's yet to be seen if the tariffs will be inflationary. The Trump administration has been very clear. Howard Lutnick has said that he does not think the tariffs will be inflationary. Can you just explain why you believe you think the tariffs will be inflationary, and what you make of the fact the U.S. administration has been adamant that this will not increase inflation?
Well, look, I'm going to let the U.S. administration speak for themselves. We've been very clear. There are two effects of tariffs on inflation. Tariffs are going to weaken the Canadian economy. They're going to weaken U.S. demand for our exports. Americans have to pay those tariffs when they import our goods. That's going to reduce their demand for our exports. So our exports to the United States will be weaker. Certainly what we're hearing from businesses is that is having an impact on their investment plans. They're scaling back their hiring intentions. So that's going to spill into the domestic economy. It could well mean layoffs. certainly what we're hearing from Canadians, that they are becoming more worried about their job security, particularly in export-oriented sectors. That, of course, means that they're becoming more cautious in their spending, so domestic demand will also slow. That will all put downward pressure on inflation. But as I outlined earlier, there are a number of direct cost pressures involved with tariffs. The Canadian dollar is depreciating. Anything you import is more expensive as a result. Retaliatory tariffs add an extra charge on anything coming in from across the U.S. border. That increases costs. Businesses are they're also looking for new suppliers to avoid tariffs. They're looking for new markets. That entails costs. There could well be supply chain problems. Businesses are holding more inventories to try to manage those things. These things all have costs. Somebody has to pay for those costs, and ultimately they get passed through to the consumer. So it wouldn't be surprising if you saw some increase in inflation as those costs get passed through. What we're doing is we're focused on weighing those downward pressures and those upward pressures. Our job is to maintain price stability, and that's what we're focused on.
All right, whether you want to believe them or not, that's what the Bank of Canada governor had to say. And then here's someone that I like to put a little bit more faith in. The angry mortgage guy, Ron Butler, on X. And he also had a YouTube video about this, explaining his thoughts from a career mortgage broker, if I'm not mistaken. And it's very well laid out. But we're not going to watch the video. We're going to read his post on X. 25 basis points cut. Bank of Canada does the obvious. Because the Bank of Canada governor, Tiff Macklem, knows what's coming, and he only has one main tool. The trade war, if it extends more than a couple of months, is devastating to Canada's economy. Rates go down and will keep going down. Just necessary. Expect another cut and likely deeper 50 basis points on April 16th. Because the 3% rate that just went to 2.75 is a neutral rate. As the economy declines, the Bank of Canada moves to a rate that tries to stimulate the economy. Expect the Bank of Canada to move to 2% in the next couple of months. But inflation. The bank will monitor for inflation, but the economic emergency comes first. And although inflation is almost inevitable in a trade war, the Bank of Canada will hold off until the last moment before considering a rate increase. What happens to mortgage rates? Variable goes down. 25 basis points, which puts variables down to 3.8 to 4.15. But a 2% rate from a few months ago means 3.3 to 3.65. What about fixed rates? Some movement down, but fixed rates derived from bond yields, and those Canada bond traders have to watch the possibility of inflation keenly. Therefore, we may not see plunging fixed rates, although we will see more than 5-year fixed in the high 3% range. Which rate do you take? Well, variable gives greater flexibility because the penalty is always low and the option to switch to a fixed at no cost. But for mortgage renewals, you push your lender hard. Whatever fixed offer you have in the hand, the Bank of Canada can do better. My bet is on lower, but anything less than 3% is highly doubtful. So there you go. That's what the angry mortgage broker, the angry mortgage guy, has to say about the Bank of Canada's latest announcement. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Is this good? Is this bad? Do you think you're gonna see mortgage rates come down? Because I personally haven't seen them. I don't know where he's getting those numbers. He's a mortgage broker, so maybe he's got access to different things. I literally just went on TD and CIBC, and fixed rates are still at 5.12%. So I'm personally not seeing the consumer mortgage rates come down. Maybe there's a different portal that you could be looking through, but this is going to be some very tough times, like very tough times. We thought it was bad with Trudeau and with COVID and stuff and the blip, and it was. But this tariff war, this trade war, which seems so highly unnecessary, I think is going to put us at a potential for a high potential for bankruptcy. That is the end of the video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.